In the archival fond of the New Zealand Marine Department for the year 1955, under registration number 108/B, is kept a detailed act of the technical inspection of the radio equipment of the merchant vessel Joyita, compiled by first-class engineer L. Simpson, following a detailed instrumental survey of the vessel in the dry dock of the port city of Suva. This document contains a key material detail that determined the entire subsequent direction of the official investigation. The operating frequency selector of the American model AVA onboard transmitter was firmly fixed at the 2182 kHz mark, intended exclusively for sending international distress signals in radio-telephone mode. However, during a detailed laboratory analysis of the copper core of the shielded antenna cable, concealed under 6 layers of oil paint on the starboard wooden mast, experts discovered a hidden mechanical break that reduced the effective range of the high-frequency signal to a negligible radius of 2 nautical miles. This technical defect meant that the ship's crew had for many hours been sending distress signals into the void, operating under the full conviction that their geographical coordinates were being recorded by the coastal services in Apia. The present historical investigation aims to deconstruct the mystical and speculative hypotheses and to restore the true chain of institutional, financial, and technical factors that led to the complete disorganization of the management system on board and the subsequent disappearance of the people. Before we proceed to a detailed analysis of the archival materials, financial statements, customs declarations, and original witness interrogation protocols, which allow for a step-by-step reconstruction of the administrative mechanics of this incident, we ask you to subscribe to our channel and thereby help the channel develop. Your subscriptions, ratings, and activity in the comments help us to continue working with closed archival fonds and to regularly present you with accurate historical investigations based on the principles of academic source studies and a complete rejection of unscientific conjecture. For a detailed understanding of the incident's preconditions, it is necessary to reconstruct the administrative, political, and economic structure of the region as of October 1955. The territory of Western Samoa was under the administration of New Zealand under the mandate of the United Nations from 1946. The Tokelau Islands, which were the vessel's final destination, constituted an extremely isolated and economically vulnerable administrative unit, the supply of which, with food and essential goods, depended entirely on the irregular voyages of private vessels. In the context of a post-war budget deficit, the Marine Department in Apia practiced a strict minimization of expenses for port supervision and technical inspection, which inevitably led to a general decline in the safety standards of coastal navigation. The social composition of the Joyita's passengers and crew vividly reflected the colonial hierarchy of the era. On board were 25 individuals, of whom 16 were crew members, predominantly natives of the islands of Samoa, Tokelau, and Tuvalu, serving as sailors and service personnel. The group of 9 passengers included high-ranking representatives of the colonial nomenclatura: Peter Hodgkinson, the government commissioner of the Tokelau Islands, who coordinated regional development programs, and Robert Pearson, a district labor inspector. Also on board was Dr. Alfred Dennis Parsons, dispatched to perform an emergency medical operation on the atoll of Whakaofo. The presence of civil servants of such rank aboard a vessel lacking an official passenger certificate directly indicates a deep institutional crisis within the colony's transport system, where officials were forced to use any available private craft to fulfill their duties in the absence of a regular state fleet. A historical analysis of the vessel's technical passport reveals the design features that predetermined the nature of the incident. The Joyita was designed and built at a shipyard in Los Angeles in 1931 to a custom order for the American film director Roland West, with the initial construction estimate amounting to a significant sum for that time. The vessel was named after the director's wife, actress Jewel Carmen, and functioned as a luxury wooden yacht with planking made of century-old Oregon pine over oak frames. The full technical specifications of the vessel record a length of 21 meters, a beam of 5.2 meters, a draft of 2.4 meters, and a gross displacement of 69 tons. In 1941, after the United States entered World War II, the vessel was forcibly purchased by the U.S. Navy, refitted, and commissioned into the Coastal Defense Forces under the tactical number YP-108. During this period, the vessel performed patrol duties in the waters of Pearl Harbor. The main engineering feature of the Joyita was the presence of internal hold insulation made from blocks of compressed cork with a total volume of 2.8 cubic meters. This layer was originally intended to function as a giant refrigerator for transporting perishable fish in tropical latitudes. This technological specification gave the vessel absolute positive buoyancy, making it virtually unsinkable, even if the internal compartments were completely flooded with water. After the end of hostilities, the vessel changed owners several times until, in 1952, it was leased on a long-term charter basis to Captain Thomas Henry Miller. By October 1955, Captain Miller was in a state of deep and irreversible financial crisis, as confirmed by the credit records of the Bank of New Zealand in Apia. His total debt from mortgage obligations, bill guarantees, and current port fees amounted to £2,400, and 2 lawsuits had been filed against his company by the local trade syndicate Morris Hedstrom Limited, demanding the immediate seizure of assets scheduled for October 4th. Due to a lack of liquid funds, Miller systematically economized on the maintenance of the power plant and the purchase of certified fuel, instead buying cheap, unfiltered diesel from old Army surplus. His first mate, Chuck Simpson, did not possess a professional diploma as a navigator or ship's engineer, and the assembled crew consisted of laborers without formal employment contracts. The cargo manifest for the voyage of October 3, 1955, issued by the trading company Burns Philp Company Limited, included 4 tons of dry foodstuffs, medical supplies for the mission, a shipment of lumber, and 80 empty jute sacks intended for the collection and subsequent transport of copra. The total value of the cargo was estimated at £3,100. This voyage was a critically important undertaking for Miller, one capable of temporarily preventing bankruptcy proceedings and the forced seizure of the vessel by court bailiffs. The Apia port control records indicate that on October 2, 1955, one day before the scheduled departure to sea, the Port Maine left diesel engine, a gray marine model with 225 horsepower, failed due to the destruction of the clutch coupling. Instead of turning to the port repair facilities, which would have incurred additional financial costs and a lengthy delay of the voyage, Captain Miller decided to put to sea on the single right engine. This decision constituted a gross violation of basic maritime registry rules, reduced the vessel's cruising speed to 5 knots, and completely deprived it of maneuverability. The Duty Harbor Master's report notes that Miller engaged in a sharp verbal conflict with the inspector and categorically refused to conduct the standard pre-departure inspection of the holds, citing extreme urgency. The total fuel tank capacity at the time of departure was 2,500 gallons of diesel. The vessel left the harbor on October 3, 1955, at 0500 hours. The distance of 270 nautical miles was expected to be covered in 48 hours, Reports from the Mulinu'u Meteorological Station indicate that during this period, there were no tropical cyclones in this sector of the Pacific Ocean, and the wind force did not exceed 4 points on the Beaufort scale, which, due to the absence of records of weather anomalies, completely rules out the version of the vessel's loss due to a natural storm. The bureaucratic inertia of the New Zealand colonial administration served as a catalyst for the worsening situation after visual contact with the vessel was lost. Due to the complete absence of a civilian radio station on the Tokelau Islands in 1955, the local atoll administration had no means to promptly notify Apia via communication channels that the Joyita had not arrived at its destination at the estimated time of October 5th. The first documented evidence of official concern is recorded in the Maritime Department's internal correspondence only on October 6th. However, the official order to begin search and rescue operations was signed only on October 12th, meaning with a critical delay of 7 days. Search operations involved Sunderland flying boats of the No. 5 Squadron of the Royal New Zealand Air Force based in Laukala Bay, Fiji. Flight logs indicate that the aircraft surveyed an area of over 100,000 square miles. But due to the enormous time lag and natural oceanic drift, the operation concluded without results. This delay later became the subject of a harsh inquiry in the New Zealand Parliament, where government structures were accused of systemic negligence and a complete lack of interagency coordination. On November 10, 1955, 37 days after departure, the British cargo ship Tuvalu, under the command of Captain Gerald King, discovered a drifting object at geographical coordinates 180 miles north of Vanua-Levu Island. A visual inspection confirmed it was the Joyita, found in a semi-submerged state with a stable 12-degree list to port. External damage to the superstructure indicated prolonged exposure to waves, but the rigidity and watertight integrity of the wooden hull remained uncompromised. The high position of the starboard side above the waterline fully confirmed the engineering calculations of the vessel's buoyancy, ensured by a layer of cork. The mechanical clock on the cabin bulkhead had stopped at 10:25, allowing for the precise moment of electrical power failure to be recorded. The inspection team that boarded the vessel confirmed the complete absence of people. All 25 individuals had ceased to be on board. Navigation instruments, including the sextant, chronometer, as well as the originals of the ships and radio telegraph logs, were completely missing. 3 Carley float life rafts and an auxiliary wooden lifeboat had disappeared from the deck. Meanwhile, the individual life jackets remained untouched in the lockers, indicating an extreme haste or extraordinary nature of the evacuation, during which standard safety measures were ignored. The official protocols of the Special Investigative Commission, which sat in Apia under the chairmanship of Judge K. Cresswell from February 3 to 22, 1956, constitute an extremely contradictory body of documents requiring deep source analysis. A thorough comparison of the testimonies of port engineers, officials of the supply department, and relatives of the missing reveals obvious traces of administrative pressure and attempts to conceal violations by government services. The testimonies of port mechanics, including technician James Wallen, who inspected the starboard engine prior to departure, differ radically in their assessment of the reliability of the cooling systems. One of the technicians claimed to have personally informed Captain Miller about the critical condition of the pipelines, whereas the shift supervisor signed the official certificate of the vessel's full technical readiness for the voyage, seeking to protect the department from accusations of violating the provisions of the Western Samoa Shipping Act of 1926. These contradictions are explained by the desire of the port authorities to completely shield themselves from legal liability for sending a ship with obvious defects to sea. Furthermore, the case materials contain irreconcilable discrepancies in assessing the volume and nature of the cargo being transported. The Apia Customs declarations do not match the inventory of goods recorded by the inspection team of the ship Tuvalu, indicating the possible presence on board of unaccounted-for contraband shipments, which could have acted as a hidden criminal factor. A technical audit of the internal compartments of the Joyita, conducted by Royal New Zealand Navy engineers under the direction of Arthur Deegan, makes it possible to fully reconstruct the physical picture of the accident, excluding any speculative versions. It was established that a through rupture of a 1-inch diameter copper pipe in the seawater cooling main of the auxiliary diesel generator occurred due to years of galvanic corrosion. Due to the absence of constant watch-keeping by a professional motorman, the water entering under pressure began to rapidly fill the hold space. The situation became irreversible because the ship's main bilge pumps were completely blocked by a mixture of sawdust, cotton padding material, and remnants of old cargo that had accumulated under the hold ceiling due to chronic violations of ship sanitation rules. The water quickly reached the level of the main switchboard, causing an instantaneous short circuit in the onboard electrical system and a complete forced stop of the starboard main engine, as the starters and batteries were positioned too low. As a result, the vessel completely lost propulsion, internal lighting, and the technical ability to use the onboard radio station with its damaged antenna. For the people on board, in conditions of nighttime darkness and a rapidly increasing list, the situation was perceived as imminent sinking, since most passengers and ordinary sailors were unaware of the life-saving cork layer, which guaranteed the wooden hull's excessive buoyancy under any conditions of flooding. During the 1956 investigation, versions concerning external destructive interference by third parties were examined in detail, including a hypothetical attack by Soviet or Japanese submarines, which were presumed to be operating in that sector of the Pacific Ocean amid the escalating Cold War. Politicized press publications claimed that the ship's crew might have entered a restricted military zone, leading to their violent physical suppression by foreign military formations. However, cross-referencing these assumptions with officially declassified operational logs of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and reports from the New Zealand Naval Forces completely discredits this version. Within a 500 nautical mile radius of the calculated trajectory of the Joyita in the first 10 days of October 1955, no presence of submarines, surface vessels, or military aircraft of unidentified national affiliation was recorded. The wooden hull and superstructure elements of the Joyita showed no signs of artillery fire, torpedo hits, shrapnel damage, or dynamic deformation from a collision with a large metal object. The interior of the living quarters bore no indications of combat involving firearms or bladed weapons. Thus, the version of a geopolitical conspiracy or deliberate elimination of witnesses by regular armed forces is entirely devoid of a documentary basis. The second alternative hypothesis, recorded in classified memoranda of local intelligence agencies, was an attack by pirate syndicates or the organized killing of passengers for the purpose of seizing material valuables. Proponents of this version pointed to the disappearance from the ship of expensive antibiotics, scarce consumer goods, and the personal cash savings of officials. However, a detailed economic audit of this assumption demonstrates its complete financial impracticality. The total market value of the goods in the hold did not exceed £3,100, a negligibly small sum for planning and conducting a large-scale international pirate operation, which would inevitably carry the risk of an operational clash with the patrol forces of the British Commonwealth. Furthermore, the state of Captain Miller's cabin, where personal belongings, wristwatches, and passengers' clothing were found undisturbed, indicates that if any seizure of items did occur, it was spontaneous and unsystematic. Archival documents note that the captain's massive metal safe containing ship's money and payment documents remained completely locked and bore no signs of thermal or mechanical impact, which entirely refutes a motive of profit by professional sea raiders. The most likely scenario, supported by a combination of indirect evidence and an analysis of the rigid social hierarchy on board, is a profound internal institutional conflict between Captain Miller and the ship's passengers amid a developing technical failure. When water began flooding the living compartments and the power plant ceased functioning entirely, panic naturally arose among the unskilled part of the crew and the civilians. Captain Miller, who possessed exhaustive knowledge of the Joyita's design features and the presence of cork insulation, most likely categorically refused to authorize a premature evacuation, ordering everyone to remain on board and await a natural drift toward shipping lanes. However, the colonial officials Hodgkinson and Pearson, who held high government status and legal authority, could have interpreted the captain's refusal to lower the lifeboats as a sign of mental instability or criminal negligence, which contradicted their understanding of subordination. Under these conditions, they could have initiated a forceful mutiny with the aim of violently removing Miller from operational command of the vessel. The state of the ship's medical bag belonging to Dr. Parsons, found on the floor of the central cabin with scattered surgical instruments, ampules, and bloodied gauze bandages, directly indicates that acts of physical violence occurred on board, leading to severe injuries or the loss of life of one of the conflict's participants, even before the life-saving equipment was launched. The presence of bent guardrail stanchions and an abandoned filleting knife by the hatch corroborates the version of a struggle. It is possible that Captain Miller himself was physically subdued by the conspirators, after which operational control passed to incompetent individuals who made a hasty decision to immediately abandon the ship. A technical analysis of the Joyita's life-saving infrastructure shows that the 3 missing Carly-type rafts had a maximum total capacity of no more than 18 people, while the total number of people on board was 25. Placing people on knowingly overloaded rafts and a light wooden lifeboat in the open ocean from the outset doomed them to an inevitable cessation of existence. Left without functioning navigational instruments, a sextant, supplies of drinking water, and dry provisions, which, in the panic and nighttime rush, were not transferred from the ship. The evacuation participants found themselves at the mercy of strong ocean currents, including the south equatorial countercurrent, which carried the light craft away from busy trade routes. Due to a 7-day delay in the start of search flights, New Zealand Aviation conducted systematic monitoring in a completely different geographical quadrant. The people's prolonged exposure to salt water led to their gradual and complete loss of life from progressive hypothermia, acute dehydration, and the aggressive effects of predatory tropical marine fauna. The complete absence of any physical remains, elements of clothing, or fragments of the life rafts over a vast expanse of water is exhaustively explained by the high rate of biological destruction of organic materials in the warm surface waters of the Pacific Ocean. The official legal epilogue of this case was recorded in special decrees of the Supreme Court of Western Samoa at the end of 1956. All 25 individuals aboard the Joyita at the time of its departure from Apia were officially declared missing at sea, with the subsequent recognition of their legal dissolution. Their personal property and financial assets underwent the standard procedure of judicial inheritance and account closure. Archival inventories of property seized from the drifting vessel include seawater-damaged remnants of textile products, construction materials, 40 barrels of heavy petroleum products, and passengers' personal identification documents, which were transferred for permanent storage to the holdings of the National Archives in Wellington. The damaged vessel Joyita itself, after the completion of all investigative actions, was deemed fit for further operation and sold at a public liquidation auction for the modest sum of £550 to a local merchant, David Simpson. The new owner attempted to restore the vessel and use it for coastal freight transport. However, the ship acquired a persistent negative reputation among port workers and professional sailors of the region. This led to systematic mass refusals by sailors to hire on as crew, causing the vessel to incur continuous losses. It was ultimately decommissioned for good, towed to a shoal, and broken up for timber in 1960. The investigative and judicial precedent of the Zodiac had a profound and prolonged influence on the transformation of the legal and regulatory system of maritime shipping in the dependent and trust territories of Great Britain and New Zealand. Following the detailed critical report of Justice Cresswell's commission, the Marine Department was forced to radically revise the existing regulations for port control and the rules for issuing permits to put to sea. A strict and uncompromising requirement was introduced for the presence of duplicate shortwave radio stations with fully independent, flood-proof power sources on all civilian vessels, without exception, with a displacement of over 15 tons, making regular or charter inter-island voyages. An automated system of mandatory daily radio reports was implemented, the failure to submit which within 24 hours automatically activated search and rescue protocols of the naval forces without the need for prior approval from civil ministries. Thus, the large-scale institutional failure of the management, logistics, and port oversight system, which led to the deaths of 25 people, served as a harsh catalyst for a deep modernization of colonial administrative law and a qualitative increase in navigation safety standards in the South Pacific, turning a tragedy into a set of regulatory documents governing the daily activities of future generations of navigators.